Hello and welcome to this episode of Therapist Talk. My name is Myra Khan and I'm the founder of the MCAPN. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of our videos. For full details about the MCAPN, please do check out our website. The link will be in the captions or the description below. So today on Therapist Talk, I'm joined by Sophia Khan. Welcome, Sophia.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Great. And so today, myself and Sophia, we're going to be chatting about, Sophia, your work, get a sense of the type of work you do and any specialist interests, but also really hearing from you about your experience of being a therapist and the type of clients and material that you work with. Okay. So how would you like to introduce yourself when you say that you're a therapist? What kinds of work do you do? What type of therapist are you?
So I'm what's called an integrative therapist, which basically means that I combine different approaches in counselling to best meet the needs of my clients. So there are sort of three main approaches, I guess you could say, in counselling and therapy. That I combine. I don't know if you'd like me to sort of say a little bit about each approach. So so there's the person-centered approach, which is it's slightly more sort of non-directive approach to therapy, focusing a lot more on the relationship between the client and the therapist, and the therapist acting as a guide and a source of support for the client. So and helping the client to find their own sort of way forward. So that's, I would say, my foundation as a therapist. But as well as that, I take also a psychodynamic or psychotherapeutic approach, which is more sort of looking at childhood experiences and unconscious thought processes, and patterns that form in a client's life. But I also use CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, and I'm currently completing an extra sort of training in CBT just to give me sort of a bit more grounding in that technique. So that's something that I'm sort of focusing more on at the moment, and that's CBT is really more about looking at the here and now, looking at how your thoughts and your beliefs affect your feelings and your actions, the link between those. And it's the idea that the way we think about something can affect how we feel and how we behave. So, and it really sort of works well with anxiety related issues, as well as, depression and other things. So that's something I'm working more with now. But I combine all three of those approaches.
Yeah. And I think it's also really helpful for the audience to know that whilst we might call ourselves therapists and counsellors, actually the approaches that we use, the modalities we work with are different. And I think I'm thinking much more kind of, I suppose, from a client perspective, that actually when they're going out and looking for a therapist, that they recognise that there are these different modalities, there are these different ways that they can work with their therapist in counselling, and to find one that feels that would match them, that would suit them, and also would suit working with the issue that they want to bring to counselling as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know that you work excuse me, I know that you work in private practice, is that right?
That's right. Yes. So I do have my own private practice. It's called Sophia Counselling. So I set that up sort of a year or so ago, and so I do see clients privately. As you know, I'm on the Muslim Counsellors and Psychotherapists Network directory, so people can find my details on there. And I do see sort of quite a wide range of clients through my private practice. A wide range of issues, different age ranges, different sort of backgrounds as well. I mean, obviously, I do work mostly with the Muslim clients, even, in private practice, but also, I work for other organizations as well. And the majority of my work has been with Muslim clients.
So what's in private practice, even though you can absolutely work with Muslim and non-Muslim clients, you do find, though, that you then attract a lot of Muslim clients to the work.
Yeah, that's right. I think working with a Muslim therapist, a lot of Muslim clients just feel that the therapist has a better understanding of their sort of cultural context, the religious context, having that sort of, that understanding and that sort of commonality, I guess, really does help a lot of clients in that therapeutic process.
Yeah. And how have you noticed, and I completely agree, I think so many Muslim clients do want a Muslim therapist because they recognise then that the therapist in front of them absolutely would understand the faith context and more likely to understand a cultural or ethnic context potentially as well. How have you noticed that then in your work? Like, how has that perhaps helped you as a therapist in working with Muslim clients? What do you notice then about the work then that is different potentially because it's Muslim clients that have approached you?
I think as Muslims, there are so many different dynamics, that people bring to therapy. So of course we, as Muslims have exactly the same sorts of issues that sort of anyone else would from any other religion or culture. But if you add to that sort of, cultural aspects, from, for instance, a lot of, South Asian clients, and there's that sort of, the family dynamics can be sort of quite different. The cultural expectations can be something that can cause or be an underlying factor in the issues that they're presenting with. Family dynamics, all sorts of things that present. And of course, the deen and the faith sometimes, for example, recently there seems to have been an increase in clients who are presenting with OCD, but religious OCD, so scrupulosity, which is very much sort of based around their faith. So issues like that, is something that as a Muslim therapist, I guess, or I would hope that I would be better placed to sort of help my clients than perhaps a non-Muslim therapist.
Yeah. So not only are you offering therapy then that will potentially be more faith sensitive, culturally sensitive, but actually in working with very specific issues that are faith-based that the client's bringing, there's something about what feels like then it's a really good match for you then to be able to work with not only the clients but also with the issue that they're bringing as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm really interested, and I'm always interested about people that become therapists. So what made you actually become a therapist? What was your pull or your call that drew you to train as a therapist and work as a therapist?
So I used to work in a different sort of field, after graduating. I sort of took a completely different career route, and then I took quite a long career break actually after my children were born. And during that break, I really sort of reassessed what it was that I wanted to do as a career. I didn't feel like I wanted to go back into the field that I was in, and the idea of becoming a therapist, going into that field really sort of appealed to me. One, because I saw a lot of people around me, sort of, family members, friends who were sort of suffering from mental health issues, and it was something that was sort of very sort of close to my heart. And secondly, I wanted to do something that was sort of helping people sort of, within my own community, sort of, I guess, first and foremost, but generally helping others in something that was rewarding. And I'd always had an interest in psychology and the mind and mental health. So I decided to retrain as a therapist. And that's what sort of led me to where I am now.
And is there anything in the work then that well, I've got a couple of questions that's popped into my head in you talking about kind of what drew you then to doing the work. I suppose my first question then around that would be, is it what you then expected?
Yes, and no, because it's even more possibly even more rewarding than I could have imagined. I think it's probably exceeded my expectations in terms of because once I started sort of training and then working, I think I just felt like, when you get that sense that this is exactly what I was supposed to be doing, I think I sort of got that feeling within me, which is, an incredible sort of feeling to feel like you're doing, the thing that you were meant to do. But also, there's the other aspect where it is quite demanding and it's challenging at times. So I think, perhaps I wasn't fully prepared for that. So, the training prepares you for that. And then also as you go along, you find ways of implementing self-care, and I think that's the main thing that I've had to incorporate into into my routine and my lifestyle is self-care, and making sure that I have the right sort of support around me in terms of supervision and self-care, so that I can support my clients to the best of my abilities.
Yes, self-care, absolutely, completely agree again. Self-care becomes such an important part of our practice. There's something about self-care I think is important for everybody anyways. Humans, self-care is important, but there's something about an additional need. There's an additional reason why we do it, and actually it's part of our professional practice. That actually we do have good self-care routine or behaviors or habits that support us, because of course if we look after ourselves, then we can go in and do the work with our clients.
Exactly.
So what have you noticed then in your self-care that really works for you? Could you share any of your kind of self-care habits or practices that you go, this is what I do, and it really does help?
So for me, I think it can be different for everyone. There's sort of not one way of implementing self-care that works for everyone. But for me, it's really sort of finding time for myself, doing things that sort of I enjoy doing. I've started going for sort of walks. Exercise has become a part of my routine, whereas it wasn't perhaps so much before. So going for walks and going for mindful walks, so really paying attention to, everything around me, paying attention to nature. That's something I find really sort of therapeutic and beneficial. I've also, I think, put more boundaries sort of in place around myself, because sometimes self-care can look like sort of putting some boundaries in place in terms of knowing what you can, and knowing what your limits are, knowing what you can and can't sort of take on, being able to say no to others, so that's something. I realized that, as they say, you can't pour from an empty cup. So I've realized that I need to fill my own cup, in order to pour into others, my clients, as well as sort of, the family members, around me. So that's something I've included into my self-care routine. Mindfulness, I mentioned the mindful walking, but generally just being more mindful of things that I'm doing in general, sort of incorporating a bit of meditation and deep breathing into my daily routine. That's really helped me. So those are some of the things that that I do for self-care.
But in you mentioning those different kind of self-care practices that you do for yourself, what's really struck me is that, of course, what we do for ourselves is no different to what we perhaps offer, or how we might support our clients as well. So anything that we, as therapists, we're not doing any kind of magical or different self-care than what we promote, I guess, with our clients as well, because of course whatever we find therapeutic and whatever we recognize might be therapeutic, even if we don't practice it ourselves, we recognize that equally would be applicable for clients as well. So we're not actually doing anything different to what we recommend for clients.
Absolutely. Yeah. The things that I've mentioned are also things that I would recommend to my clients. So we're just as much in need of those things sometimes as our clients are.
You mentioned earlier as well that obviously you kind of in your calling to do this work, and the reasons why to help in seeing that people around you needed that help. And then you were describing how your training prepared you for that, but of course you learn as you go along. I'm really curious, because hindsight is a wonderful thing. What is it that you now know that you might, I guess you either wished you knew before, and then following on from that, then what would that, perhaps that's some advice then that you would want to give to somebody that's thinking about becoming a counsellor or is a current trainee and training as a counsellor? So kind of with your years of wisdom kind of and experience post-qualification, what is it you've learned, and what is it you would have wanted to have known when you started your journey?
To ask for help when it's needed, so like I said, boundaries, knowing when to say no to things which they're not able to do, asking family members or friends for help, not being because often I think generally in life, and I think sometimes as women especially, we have this tendency to really expect a lot from ourselves, and some people find it difficult to, even though that's the profession that we're in, we're encouraging others to reach out, so to take that advice yourself as well, to reach out when you feel you need to ask for help when you feel you need to, and to really just I guess prepare yourself, in terms of the knowledge, the skills, the support in terms of supervision that's out there, really make use of those things. Find yourself a good placement, that will allow you to learn and grow as a counsellor. I think those are, some of the things, that I would say. And I think just to really understand your reasons for coming into this profession, and remind yourself of that from time to time, what your intentions were, what your reasons were for coming in, and to really, I guess, remember that, for me, I think one of the big realizations for me actually was just what an honor and a privilege it was to be allowed into somebody's life, for somebody to take you along on that journey with them, is such a huge honor, and just to sort of remember that and use that to help sort of motivate you as well.
Yeah. What I'm really getting from that is such a strong sense of is essentially kind of look after yourself. Like you're going into a profession which is about looking after your clients, looking after other people, offering that care and support for others. But actually, in order for us to do that, the takeaway from it is really about, well, look after yourself throughout that whole process as well. And that, as you've just said, starts right from kind of day one of your training, or equally even before you start training, thinking about the reasons why you even want to come into the profession and why you want to do the training. That from the very beginning of the journey, look after yourself, because
Absolutely.
you need to be able to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that, Sophia, because I think it's really important for people watching this, that if they're thinking about or are already training as counsellors, to recognise that actually looking after yourself is fundamental to doing this job, and as well doing this job well, to actually do the job well and to have longevity in the role. You do need to look after yourself in the process. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm curious then, that I really appreciate you talking about in giving advice today to trainees and to people thinking about becoming therapists. As you're obviously since now working in private practice, what do you think would be helpful for potential clients or clients to know about therapy? So being in the position of getting inquiries, walking potential clients through the process of engaging in therapy with you, what is it you would like them to know about the work that you do?
I think a client, it's not always an easy thing to reach out and take that first step, towards asking for help and starting therapy. So first to if they've taken that first step, to give themselves credit for that, and to recognize that it was a brave thing for them to do. And then regarding the therapy process itself, I guess there's something about expectations sometimes, that clients have around therapy. So I guess it's understanding. I mean, like I said, there are different approaches in counselling, but it's understanding that the counsellor won't necessarily give you all of the answers. They will help you often to find your own answers and your own solutions and your own way forward. So knowing that or understanding that from the beginning, and most counsellors will explain that to you anyway. They'll explain how they work, so that'll be something that you'll be aware of, so knowing that it's not always an easy process to go through. It can involve opening up potentially about things that you may never have fully opened up about, and it can feel quite vulnerable sometimes, when you're in that position. But to know that your counsellor, your therapist is really there to walk you through that, to sort of almost hold your hand through that process of therapy, through that journey. And even though I think counselling can sometimes, depending on, because I do a lot of trauma therapy, for example. So for these clients, often it's incredibly difficult to talk about some of the traumatic experiences that they've had. And sometimes it can feel like they're feeling a little bit worse, before they start feeling better. So to bear that in mind, that it's not sort of this always a linear process where you're just gonna, go from A to B and be completely fine, sort of week by week. It might involve, it's a bit like a journey of sort of climbing that mountain, where you sort of are climbing up, but every now and again you might sort of lose your footing a little bit and feel like you've taken a step back, but then actually you're still making that progress, that steady progress to the top.
Yeah. That's really helpful advice, because I'm thinking, so many people perhaps think about wanting to access therapy, but they're not quite sure. But what you're recognizing actually is that it's a really courageous step for people then to send that email, make contact with a therapist, inquire, pick up the phone. And it's just to really recognize and acknowledge that yes, it's a real courageous step to kind of get yourself into therapy. And then once you're in therapy, to acknowledge that, yes, it is hard work, and you've got to put the work in as well. It's not just sitting there and a therapist doing therapy to you.
Exactly.
It's very much a proactive process that both of you engage in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It takes work on sort of both sides.
Yeah. And you mentioned as well, really briefly, that you specialise in trauma therapy. Can you say more then about maybe the specialist areas or the niches that you do work and offer clients?
Okay, so I have worked a lot with trauma, and as well as private practice, I do work for a couple of other organisations, and one of them is a domestic abuse charity, a faith-based domestic abuse charity called Nora TV, and my work there is with clients who've experienced abuse of any kind, not just domestic abuse. So there's a lot of complex trauma involved, and a lot of these people have experienced trauma at a young age as well, so sort of adverse childhood experiences, and they've often been living with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, for most of their lives, sometimes without realizing it. So those trauma responses, the fight, flight and freeze responses, people often don't realize that they've spent most of their life stuck in one or more of those trauma responses, so there's a lot of psychoeducation around the therapy sessions, sort of helping clients to understand what's going on for them, you know, in their mind, in their body, because of course trauma affects the body as well, you know, that mind-body connection, but also working in a way that is very, you know, that trauma therapy is a you know, sometimes requires longer a longer period of therapy than, you know, other forms of therapy. So giving them, you know, that time and that space to really explore what's going on for them, giving them that, you know, that validation, that compassion, you know, that perhaps they haven't experienced elsewhere, you know, in other relationships. And that's where I think the relationship is so important in all forms of therapy, but especially in, well, perhaps more so in trauma therapy, where the relationship with the therapist, between the therapist and the client, is, it can be reparative sometimes, you know, so it can help to repair some of the, you know, some of what was missing, or some of the damage perhaps that was done in other relationships in their lives, you know, can potentially be repaired through the therapeutic relationship.
Yeah. And again, what I'm really hearing in what you're just saying, that from, again, as perhaps from a client perspective or from somebody watching this video, there's something about the very fact that you specialise in working with trauma, adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, supporting people and working with PTSD. Very often clients perhaps sit there and think, well, I'm the only one that's gone through this, or I'm the only one and therefore no one else is going to understand. And actually, by you saying that, actually I work in this field, from your perspective then, it sounds as if you come across this, unfortunately, you come across this quite often and it's quite common. And so the fact that you specialise in this area just goes to show that actually many people unfortunately do experience these traumatic events and situations, and counsellors such as yourselves that specialise in trauma then can offer very personalised therapy to help that client work through their experience of it.
Absolutely, yeah, and it is a very personal sort of journey as well, you know, no two you know, experiences are the same, you know, each person is different in, you know, in terms of their experiences, in terms of their therapeutic journey, you know, it's very individual. And yes, you know, that therapeutic relationship, that journey that somebody, you know, undertakes with the counsellor, you know, can potentially, you know, be such a difficult but very sort of healing journey.
And I'm thinking that in combination with what you were saying a moment ago about some therapy, again, depending on modality, can be short term, but other work and potentially trauma work is longer term. And so again, I just want to kind of acknowledge then that with you being in private practice, and so people can contact you directly, and so you do offer both short term and long term therapy for clients.
I do. Yeah, absolutely. Short term and long term therapy, and I do work mostly online. So you know, I'm able to take clients from all over, you know, the country potentially, you know, because it's all done via Zoom, via Zoom video therapy. So so yeah, it's quite flexible, you know, and I'm quite flexible in that sense.
Yeah, because I can imagine there'll be people watching this video and going, oh, Sophia sounds just like the type of therapist that I'm looking for. And actually, because you're online, you automatically become more accessible for people to be able to work with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, lovely. Well, thank you so much, Sophia, for joining me today. If anybody watching this does want to contact Sophia, we'll put a link to your counselling profile on our directory in the description below, and links also then to your social media as well. So
great.
Thank you so much, Sophia, for joining me today. And thank you for those of you that have joined us to watch and listen to this episode of Therapist Talk. And I look forward to all of you joining me again for a future episode. Bye for now.